The libertarians who hate Trump very much are supporting the person who will help him.
They are
the
assisting
most.
him win over this voting bloc. Because I think your point is interesting, right? Like Joe Biden is not going to the Green Party's situation and trying to win their voters because they're not as influential.
Well, we've had there's been some polling done, and 67% of Chase Oliver's current supporters voted for Joe Biden in 2020, and another 11% voted for Howie Hawkins of the Green Party. So 78% of Chase Oliver's supporters are. That's right. Right.
I'm going to invite Chase Oliver back onto the Culture War for a one-on-one debate where I will intentionally lose.
Oh, beautiful. So I have been going and endorsing Chase Oliver on any and every progressive podcast I can get onto, of making a very good, compelling argument for why he is the best candidate to end the war in Gaza. Talking about how he understands the Federal Reserve and monetary policy better and how that's going to end the wars. And I've just been going very hard for progressives.
I don't agree. I don't disagree with that. I think
Certainly.
If I went to a progressive, I'd be like, I got to be honest. I think Chase Oliver is your best choice.
I completely agree with you. There's another kind of just interesting dynamic with some of like the cultural stuff versus the more hardcore policy stuff. But the truth is that Chase is, I think, I don't know the guy very well. I've only met him a couple times, but I would say probably great on war, on guns, on taxes, on money, on spending. I mean, like issues that I bet all of us would probably see very eye to eye on. There is just this weird cultural component of things where like, what's bizarre is like even amongst anti-war leftists, like there's anti-war leftists who I love. I like really get along great with. I'm doing Glenn Greenwald's show in a couple days. Love Glenn Greenwald. Love Jimmy Dore. Love like I've read like tons of Noam Chomsky books and stuff like that. I like a lot of the anti-war leftists. None of them are woke though.
Correct.
None of them are for trans and the kids. They all recognize, they're like, no, trans and the kids, that's like a CIA plot to divide us all against each other. We don't believe in that. But Chase kind of carries a lot of that cultural baggage. And I do think for a lot of us, and this to me is kind of bigger than libertarianism, to be honest, is that it's just like, if you're okay with this, if you're okay with child abuse, that's a deal breaker for me. I can't.
Yeah.
Here's my question for you, for both of you. Do you believe private businesses should be allowed to mandate vaccines for all employees and customers?
Well, look.
Can we dig into this a little bit?
So I would say this, that I would say that the libertarian position kind of is that like businesses can do what businesses want to do. However, if you're talking about vaccine mandates, like private vaccine mandates in, say, 2021, where there has been the biggest assault on liberty in American history on this wide of a scale has just occurred by government fiat, then the government has come in and created, or let's say funded the creation of this experimental vaccine and shielded these big pharmaceutical companies from any liability. While they're not shielded from the profit, they get to rake in all the... No, but I'm just saying, and in this context, right, after all of the government propaganda outlets are lying through their teeth to push this vaccine on everybody, and then in those circumstances, a business decides to mandate the vaccine to everybody, I don't think the libertarian comment on that situation should be, that's their right to do that.
This was
the libertarian comment on that should be like, this is a giant statist operation that is totally antithetical to the free society that we want to live in. And so when a libertarian just comes out, now in pure libertarian land, a private business should be able to do whatever they want with their private business. But that's not what we're talking about.
It was a giant psyop.
So I disagree in that it really comes down to Ron Paul and him saying about abortion, it should not be illegal, it should be unthinkable.
Correct.
And so the answer is always cultural. When culture shatters, and I think this is the big push of multiculturalism, because this is what this does.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes.
You then end up in a situation where you have basically large statist operations where everyone falls in line and marches in lockstep. If you had a strong culture that had moral lines and lines in principle, and there's a difference, but they like if everybody agreed. Michael Mouse had a great quote the other day. I'm actually gonna pull up his quote.
I think it should be culturally unacceptable.
But and so that's something you can't just make happen. Right?
I cannot.
So let me try and find this quote from Michael Malice. I just want to let you guys know that Michael Malice is a genius. He's a good friend of the show. We love him dearly.
I don't care for the guy.
You don't care for him, huh? Well, I'm scrolling down, so I'm pattering a little bit as I find this excellent quote that really sums up a lot. I normally like to cite, where is this? I normally like to cite Seamus Coughlin for this. Let me see if I can. Why is it not coming up? Did it get deleted? I think it got deleted. No. I like to cite Seamus Coughlin in that if everyone in the world had the same worldview as Seamus Coughlin, you would need no police. There would be no crime. There would be peace and harmony and no theft. And it's because his moral framework does not stand for those things. The issue is that everyone has different, a different worldview, and then you'll just end up with people who I don't know you, don't care about you. Your views are bad to me, and my views are bad to you, and so that's ultimately where we're at right now as it pertains to. I lost my train of thought trying to.
You're talking about the Ron Paul culture versus
right.
Versus...
The Malice quote.
Yeah. I'm trying to find this quote because it was so good and it's not popping up.
I think you should just make it up. I think you should just give a better quote.
I don't understand why it's not popping up. Oh, it's right here. If everyone thought like me, we wouldn't have any murders, we wouldn't have any child abuse, no robberies, no theft, and very few rapes.
Very few.
He's a funny guy. But yeah, short of that, when it comes to my view is, in the long term, agreed. The long-term goal should be, you don't need to mandate businesses do anything. You don't need to put restrictions on them. You don't need civil rights law because businesses do the right thing. Right now, they don't. And so my view is, during the, I don't remember when Chase Oliver tweeted this, but he said, I believe private businesses should do whatever they want, but government should not be allowed to. I said, hey, that's a pro-vaccine mandate stance, because what people need to understand about the mandates for employees, for performers, it was all done privately. Not literally all of it, but the bulk of it. My friends who are musicians, they're like, this venue decided to do this. The government did not make them do it. They decided.
It's gross.
However, Joe Biden did try that.
He did.
If you have 100 employees or more thing.
Yeah, which ultimately failed. And of course, there were, during the reign of the vaccine passports, there was in major cities across the country, it was actually the law of the land.
LA?
That if you were a building, you had to, be vaccinated in order to enter the building. I think, look, one of the major reasons why I am a libertarian. This is one of the very major reasons why I'm a libertarian, as opposed to being some other flavor of kind of right-wing dissident, is that I do think that libertarianism in general offers solutions that get to the core of the issue, whereas a lot of times just kind of reactionary right-wing policies are very surface level.
Yes.
And so, listen, there is something very surface level where you have the government locks down the country, or the government declares a state of emergency, locks down the country, prints $6 trillion in a year, destroys the value of the dollar, has all of these awful policies. Then, by the way, the government stands down and allows rioters to riot through the summer. Then the government funds developing this vaccine, then shields these companies from liability, gives them immunity, all of this, right? And then there's a private business who's mandating it. And it's very tempting to come in and go, we just need a little bit more government power in order to say that business can't do that. But I'm just saying, if you really want to get at the heart of this beast, it's to get rid of all this government involvement that created this whole mess.
But the issue then is it's always about culture, because laws written down don't matter. I do want to say this, though, because
that's why me and you are talking in microphones instead of running for Congress. You know what I mean? That's why we're trying to change the culture.
But you mentioned the reason why you're a libertarian is because you get to the root of a lot of these issues. I completely agree. And the issue I take with a lot of libertarians is that, and I know it's going to be very offensive to a lot of libertarians, but they share an emotional trait with communists in the overly idealistic approach to how things get taken care of.
I agree.
So my view is,
well, in the sense that there's idealists amongst libertarians and communists, sure, but there's a pretty big difference.
Some of us are willing to do the crappy work so that the rest of you can still be idealists and cling, tightly to every single ideological position.
I think the Libertarian Party's position, I shouldn't say the whole party, but the members of the party who hold the open borders position, is a good example of the faction of people who are idealists and not realists. So when I saw Chase Oliver win, despite all these positions and the people who were cheering and booing. I got to admit it. I forgot the guy's name, who said he was a doctor and he had prescribed vaccines and he got booed by everybody. My response to that was like, I'm sitting in the back of the room as the debate's happening. And I was like, this guy's a libertarian who believes there should be no mandate, who has firsthand experience, and he's telling you his experience and you're booing him for it. Why? I don't know why you're booing his experience. You can like, I don't understand that. I'm like, you read something on the news in your circle that asserted something as fact that you believe and trust. Here's a guy who says the mandates are wrong, but here was my experience, so you boo. I'm like, I see the idealists in the Libertarian Party, an overly idealistic party. What do the Democrats and the Republicans do? The Democrats come out and they say, what does our base want? And they go, these are the really popular positions right now. And then Democrats and Republicans will release their party platform trying to focus on the core issues that affect the nation, which is why they dominate. The Libertarians say, we don't care about none of that. We care about our ideals, which is fine. But when you have immigration as the number 2 issue, according to Gallup, among voters, and a good portion of the Libertarian Party is like, open borders, Ellis Island model, and they nominate the guy who says, let them come in.
Well, I'll say to Chase's defense, he did say Ellis Island, at least not straight open borders.
But Ellis Island was open borders.
I mean, I guess
it's slightly less.
Technically, you had to like pass a screening or something like that. But yes, it's
I mean, technically, our borders are not all completely open. They say
yes, we don't exactly have.
We don't really do that
borders.
either.
But he has a video where he's at the border saying they should be allowed to walk in and then come here and work and live. That is open borders.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. I'm not going to fight you on that. Yeah. But let me just. I think there's a couple things that need to almost be separated here, right? So the idea of being idealistic, I think, is fine and I think is good. And I actually think more people we should demand more out of our system than we currently get. I think open borders, and I've gotten in a lot of arguments with open borders libertarians, I think is wrong in theory. Not just a disaster that it would be in practice, but I think it's a totally wrong theory to deduce from libertarianism that there should be open borders. Like, it does not make sense. There's been a lot of great libertarian thinkers who have written on this, but just in short, the idea of like, okay, libertarianism essentially is about property rights and the non-aggression principle. And if you're self-ownership, now if you believe in that, then essentially what libertarianism you could deduce from that would be that, Tim, you own this building. Anyone who you invite to this building, has a right to come to this building. So in a sense, you could say anyone who America invites into this country has a right to come. But the idea that you can deduce from property rights that masses of uninvited people just have a right to come here, even if the domestic population does not want them to come, that is just bonkers. That's antithetical to freedom.
I just want to shout out how on the Culture War last week, I called Karen Ann a communist. And I said, you're all communists. And I meant that as a joke.
Sure.
But my point I was making is we were talking about how in Huntington, I think it's Huntington, West Virginia, right? Mm-hmm. They made a pride mural in the street. Mm-hmm. And my attitude is people should not be destroying these things. That's not the way we want. That's not how a society should function. It's not the society we want to live in. That's Antifa society. When you engage in those behaviors, the leftists are going, yes, more destruction of social norms.
Yep.
We're supposed to be sitting down with each other and begrudgingly accepting compromise to live and be neighbors. So I'm bringing this up. Karen Ann says, well, the people were coerced into paying for it effectively. I hate quoting people because I may misquote her, but I believe her position was there are people who live there who did not want that painted. My response is, if you do not vote, if you have a system in place where we all agree, okay, if you have a city council, we vote for city council. If you do not go out and do your work to knock on doors, to register voters and vote, and an opposing political faction gains control, and then through the system you agreed upon, and you live here, decides to paint the street, that is in accordance with your social agreements with your neighbors. And I have no problem with this. You don't have to live in Huntington, West Virginia and pay them taxes. You can move. I'm not saying it's easy. The argument being made by her and many libertarians is the community, the jurisdiction can't force you to pay for something they want to do. The reason why I call that communist is, here's how I view it. I own a house. I've lived here for 20 years, and every Friday night we have pizza and wings. Everybody pitches in, Some people move out, some people move in. But whenever someone's moving in, we say, hey, just so you know, every Friday night, everybody puts in $10 because we have pizza and wings. Well, one day there's a kid. It's been 20 years. He's 18. And he moves in and he goes, I don't think it's fair. You know, look, I was born here. It's not fair that I have to pay for pizza and wings. And we go, okay, well, no one's keeping you here. You don't have to live by our rules. We love you and appreciate everything you've done. And there's the door. And they go, no, I should get to live here without paying for it. Even though it's your community and your rules and your standards, I'm not going to raise money to vote. I'm not going to convince anybody not to do it. I'm just going to say outright, I shouldn't have to. And I'm like, okay, now you're in my house telling me what I have to do outside of the norms of society. There's this view among many libertarians, the open border libertarians, and this is sort of to your point, that our jurisdictions don't matter, that community isn't allowed to make pacts with each other. I don't care if it's a government or a private organization. Organizations are organizations. And if someone comes into my organization, whether it's, you know, me and my neighbors formed a neighborhood watch or a pact, and we all agree on these terms, everyone agreed this is how we're going to vote, and then someone doesn't like it, and all of a sudden they're saying they don't have to be involved in it, even though we agreed, like that doesn't work. And so a communal jurisdiction, like a community like Huntington, West Virginia, yes, there's a lot of people there who are upset. They live there and they didn't like that it happened. I got bad news, right? In Charlestown, West Virginia, they have a mostly liberal city council, progressive, despite the fact that it is overwhelmingly Christian. There's a Latin mass in downtown in Charlestown. And I asked one of the council members who's conservative, why? Why is it progressive city council? And he goes, because conservatives don't vote. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, like, so there's your problem. The problem is not that you were coerced by your small community into paying taxes to fund a street painting. It's that nobody does the work and then complains that the people who did can control the coffers.
Well, I mean, I certainly think that this is one of the problems of government in general, is that it is an instrument of force, and there are winners and losers within that game. But so, like, I think the ultimate libertarian answer is, like, you privatize this stuff and then it solves the problem. Like in your example, you can do that in your house, and you can have these rules where if you live here, you pitch in for and now it's done on a voluntary basis, and it's your choice to accept those or not accept those.
No question.
But, well, let me just very quickly say, I think that what a lot of those open borders libertarians type almost get wrong is that it's like, okay, you can be against the state forcing people, but you're not supposed to be against the nation or against the community in general. And something like open borders, or the de facto open borders that we have today, are like the most wildly unpopular thing. It's like it's not even like the majority of the country's against it. Like over 90% of the country's against it.
I have a question. What's the difference between a private house deciding we're going to spend money in a certain way and a community of 1,000 people doing the same thing?
Well, look, okay, so the difference is between voluntary interaction or forced interaction. Yeah. It's what's the difference between making love or rape. I mean, it could be the same action, but the difference is whether people consented or not. And to that, like to your example, right, like of making rules in a house, that is a voluntary, like, interaction. How is Huntington?
There's some level of
not
duress.
Well, because look, if there's people in this community who don't wish to fund the public roads, they don't have a choice.
So they're
forced
no,
to.
and
That's true. They can move out.
They vote no.
Oh, okay, yeah, but that's different. I mean, like,
if you're in my house and we all have an agreement, and I'm not an authoritarian who rules the house, everyone gets a say.
Sure.
And then 7 out of 10 people say, spend the money on pizza. The 3 people who don't like it can be like, well, I don't want to give you money for this. And I say, well, we all agreed. You agreed this is how we handle things.
Okay, yeah, but
maybe you should move out.
But if you agreed then you just answered the question of how it's voluntary. Because they agreed. The question is, when I'm in my house, I'm not in your house. And I'm not in your house, and I'm in my house with my own rules. And now you're going to say, okay, we're taking a percentage of your income to fund something you don't want to fund.
I still disagree, because you are afforded many great benefits and privileges that you did not ask for, that you pay for. And I would assume that most people...
Well, like, what do you mean?
Then where do you draw the line on getting to say no?
This is the real challenge with what's going on.
I just want to... What did you mean by, like, the benefits and privileges that
Roads, my roads.
For you have a fire department, you have police, whether you like the police or not. That's an interesting coin toss. But fire department for sure, EMTs, the 911 service. There's emergency cellular infrastructure that will work for any cell phone, regardless of whether you pay for it. Sure. Roads is an obvious one. Sure. But I respect the idea of putting up tolls and things like this. I just mean that we are in the safety bubble of the world.
Public utilities.
Okay, well, but I'll
water,
say this. Okay,
plumbing.
So I'll grant you all those things. Let's even, for the sake of argument, just say cops are good. Okay, like just to move past that one. First of all, it is the money that I'm forced to pay for those services is the biggest ripoff in human history. Literally,
let's pause.
I pay over half of my income in taxes for the what should be a fraction of that much for those services. So it's not as if there's some gift to me. But look, Tim, but you could say, look, somebody else, forget even government related to that stuff. We're all, in a sense, given all of these privileges by people who just invented things and came up with new technologies and all of that. That doesn't then mean that that person could come to me and say, your money or your life because I benefited. But
hold on. Let's break this down. The one thing I do want to add, without getting too personal, is there's a difference between paying taxes for things that are a ripoff and being a net taxpayer. The overwhelming majority of Americans are not net taxpayers.
Yeah, screw them. I'm talking about me. I'm just kidding.
But here's the challenge. I certainly would prefer to live in a world where I have my home, I have my property, and any money they want to take from me, they got to ask for first. I do not consent to the bombing of children in these foreign countries.
Okay.
I do not consent to the funding of Israel so they can be involved in their war with Gaza, regardless of your moral stance on it, or Ukraine. That is all wrong. And so I will scream to the high heavens every night in the show. I will advocate as much as I can. Foreign policy has always been the bigger issue for me. And that's why I think the president matters, because foreign policy is his domain. Congress should be declaring wars, and the president should be allowed to get involved in wars. So I want a president who's going to do the inverse and stop these things. My point is simply, here's the challenge. We're all born in this country where we stand on the shoulders of giants. The roads that have been paved, the mountains that have been bored through, the bridges that have been built that simply exist whether we pay anything or not. You can be a destitute, homeless man who has zero income, and you can freely walk across large $200 million bridges that connect places that you'd have never been able to get to before. And you say, but I never asked for it. And I'm like, and that's true. So the challenge is not, it's a combination of things. I shouldn't say not. The expansion of human jurisdiction and the size of population makes it impossible for you to just decide to go live in the woods.
Yeah.
200 years ago, you'd say, I don't like any of you. I don't like your rules. The woods, I'm going to go stake a claim. And you could. You can't do that anymore. There are some, in some ways you can.
And there are still people who homestead land and stuff like that in certain parts of the country. But yes, it's not.
But the federal government will still come in. So even when you don't generate U.S. dollars, the federal government actually in law will take your pumpkins or your chickens. No joke. They actually state that U.S. dollars is not the only way to pay taxes. So if you get a homestead and you say, I don't care for U.S. dollars, I'm going to grow tomatoes, taxman shows up and says, we're taking those tomatoes. We're taking 20% of your tomatoes because we're owed it. That's a problem. And so the challenge we're in is the system has become so large. We are born into benefits, which we do receive, in a system that expects us to keep paying into it to maintain all of these things in some way. And many people don't agree to live that way. My challenge is this. It is difficult, but you can still go to an uninhabited island and homestead there and mostly be left alone. And then you will be excised from all the modern benefits of society. Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.